of the leading environmental technology trade fair that brings together policymakers, key industry players, thought leaders, and innovators from across the globe for commerce, learning, and networking opportunities. We are happy to be organizing this webinar on Earth Day, which is an annual event celebrated around the world to demonstrate support for environmental protection. On behalf of EFAT India and on behalf of our knowledge partners, All India Institute of Local Self-Government, a warm welcome to all the panelists and our participants. Thank you for the overwhelming response to this webinar. This is our 7th webinar in the series that brings a panel discussion to focus on the impact of COVID-19 on urban development and the measures that the urban local bodies and state authorities are undertaking to recover from the crisis with a raised sense of urgency, if I may say. I'm sure you will have striking insights from the discussion that follows with our expert panelists. I'm very happy to introduce our moderator, Shri Ajit Kumar Jain, IAS retired. He's a senior advisor and director at the Center for Sustainable Governance of All India Institute of Local Self-Government. He was formerly the Principal Secretary of Water Supply and Sanitation Department, Government of Maharashtra, and subsequently the Principal Secretary and the Additional Chief Secretary to Chief Minister of Maharashtra for more than 4 years. He worked as State Information Commissioner, Maharashtra, in the rank of Chief Secretary from 2014 to 2019. During his tenure in the government, spanning nearly 37 years, he acquired wide experience in the field of urban administration and development, focusing policy, governance, and implementation of programs. So a very, very rich profile. I am told we have over 650 registrations. So it's a packed house, Mr. Jain. I kindly hand it over to you now. Thank you. Your mic is off, Mr. Jain.
Thank you, Bhupendra, for a very generous introduction. And good morning to all the esteemed panelists and all the participants. I'm really delighted to know that there are 650 participants who have registered, and I hope most of them really join in. As Bhupendra said, today is the Earth Day. Incidentally, it is 50th anniversary of the Earth Day. And ironically, while COVID-19 has hit all the nations across, it has brought all the nations together in a resolve to fight COVID-19. I wish and I hope that all these nations, rich, poor, developed, developing, will come together in the same way and resolve to protect our Mother Earth also and take climate agenda in the same spirit. Now, coming to the workshop, coming to the webinar subject, as you all know, the subject of the webinar is impact of COVID-19 on urban development, how are cities tackling the problem. While we speak, COVID-19 has impacted more than 2.5 million people across the world. In India, the number has reached about 20,000 and it's still counting. There are states, there are cities who are more affected in terms of numbers, cities like Delhi, Mumbai, cities in Rajasthan or Bhopal, etc. And it has brought the entire machinery, whether it is central government or the state government or the local government at the city level, together to really fight for it. We have public health department at the helm of the affairs because it's a disease, it's an epidemic. At the same time, there are enforcement agencies, law and order agencies who are enforcing social distancing, who are enforcing isolation. We have disaster management authorities, disaster management units, who are also kind of chipping in with a lot of knowledge management and implementation of Epidemic Act. But the city managers are central to the entire thing. This is my personal opinion. As ULBs, as city, as towns, you have to play a very major role in keeping the city together, in maintaining the basic urban services going, and at the same time protecting your staff who are really what they call frontline workers in the entire fight. The theme of the webinar today is specifically what is the role of the urban local bodies in the fight against COVID-19? How are they able to coordinate with other enforcing agencies? That's one point. And secondly, and which I feel is very important, as I recall, almost 25 years back, there was an epidemic of plague, pneumonic plague in Surat. And what emerged from that was a whole set of solid waste management rules, liquid waste management rules. There was intervention by Supreme Court and several policy interventions by Government of India and state government. So perhaps the experience that we all get from COVID-19 will lead us to some paradigm shift, the way urbanization is happening in the city, or the way we are maintaining the basic urban services in the city. Let's start the session straight away because the time is limited and the participants are fairly good in number, large in number. Let me first of all introduce the panelists. I have already been introduced, so no need to repeat my background. But definitely I'd like to say at the outset is that All India Institute of Local Self-Government is partnering IFET in organizing this workshop, this webinar. All India Institute is a very old organization. It was set up in 1926 and has been a leading institution in the training and capacity building and also policy advocacy on urban management. We have a regional center for urban and environmental studies set up by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, which I think is the cell or the organization which is anchoring this workshop or this webinar today. Now, I'd like to introduce a very rich panel of speakers today with us. We have Mr. Anurag Yadav, who is the IS officer and the Secretary of Urban Development Department, Government of Uttar Pradesh. And he's also associated as the Director of State Mission for Amrut. He has previously been the District Magistrate and Collector of cities like Lucknow, Jhansi, and Jaunpur. So we'll bring a lot of rich field experience along with the policy and implementation interface issues. We have then Mr. Samir Jain, who is the urban transformation leader in the KPMG's government advisory practice. And he primarily focuses on policy advisory and impactful use of technology and infrastructure augmentation to prepare the governments to take on challenges and opportunities of next generation cities. Mr. Jain is also driving the smart city development portfolio and urban infrastructure. In fact, we have to understand today, if possible, how the smart cities are implementing the COVID-19 strategy. Is it better than those cities where smart city mission is not being implemented? The next speaker today is Ms. Maria Hussain, who works with UNICEF India as the WASH specialist in the effective management of WASH program in India. She has been extensively working in development and emergency settings in the areas of WASH, disaster risk reduction, climate change, and community engagement. We have Mr. R. Srinivas, who will join us a little later, around, I suppose, 11 or 11:30 or so. Mr. Srinivas has been heading the Metropolitan and Union Territories Division in the Town and Country Planning Organization. He is responsible for rendering technical advice and assistance on various issues pertaining to planning and development of the Delhi NCR, Chandigarh, town planning departments of Union Territories related to urban development and so on. In fact, there was a comment by Mr. Ratan Tata about the way we are planning the cities, why so many people are in informal settlements with very high densities. Probably Mr. Srinivas could throw some light on the city planning issue as well. Then we have Dr. Arshad Warsi. Was a very long name as his long experience. I just mentioned Dr. Warsi, and he is the man behind turning Indore around into the cleanest city in the country and sustaining that for years together. Dr. Arshad Warsi is working in the field of environment engineering and waste management since last 25 years. He has worked on many national and international projects, policy formulations, and advisory services to Government of India, states, and more than 300 cities and towns in India. He contributed to Indore, I just mentioned, to become the cleanest city of India in 2017, 18, and 2019. And we have Dr. Masood Malik, who is the Joint Managing Director of Ramke Environment Services Private Limited. Mr. Malik has been working closely with industries and investors for 25 years to manage resources and sustainability risks across business life cycle and recognized as a subject matter expert in management of hazardous material and involved in advising ministries at the country level as well. And as you all know, that management of biomedical waste is one of the most challenging aspects of COVID-19 strategy, and I think he will be guiding us on that. Now, can we straight away go to our first speaker of the day, and that is Mr. Anurag Yadav. As I mentioned, he's the secretary in the Secretary of Development in the government of Uttar Pradesh. And can I request Mr. Anurag Yadav to speak on UP's response to pandemic management? Mr. Yadav, please.
Hello. Can you hear me? I just switched on my mic and I just want to understand. Am I audible? Okay, fine. Thank you for giving this opportunity. How UP is responding to this crisis is something which I am supposed to speak, and I think the final verdict is yet to come. We are in the middle of, I would say the battle is still on. And what would be the result? What are the measures which has been taken till date? All these things will be part of much more in-depth study, how the strategies worked, what did not work. But one can safely say till date we have been able to contain and achieve it much better way if you compare from the international experience. The entire country, I would say, not only UP. So what has been this strategy? I'll focus my presentation or my points in three parts primarily. One, how we evolved our strategy, what we did till date. Second, what has been the learnings and challenges, and what is going to be the challenge in the future. How the dynamics are changing now, and particularly from the urban point of view, urban development point of view. So if you would see, it was like a shock. March first week, we were figuring out what is going to happen when this crisis is going to come. By second week, we were almost in the crisis. And by third week, the crisis had hit entire country. So this has literally come as a shock. Now, municipalities' relationship with epidemic, if one goes into the history, I won't take much time, but if you look into the history, primarily one of the first key institution which has been dealing with epidemics has been the municipalities. So the history of municipalities has evolved along with, if you read about cholera, plague, or everything which had been pre-independent era, you will find all these municipalities act always had these provisions of how to deal with epidemic. An epidemic is there, what a city is supposed to do. We do have invoked all kind of other acts with the time. We have got Disaster Management Act, become a disaster. We have now got, we have invoked the old Epidemic Act. But if you look into Municipalities Act, and I'm pretty sure all over the country, across the country, not only all these municipalities were evolved in 1870, or Chennai is the first corporation, or now if you will look into other cities, you will find that there are provisions what a municipality is supposed to do. When Corona thing came in, the first response, I would say institutional response, has flowed from how the entire state machinery is working. So I won't be just focusing on a segment of, say, municipality, because municipality is a part of this whole unit of a state machinery. So I would just say that institutionally, at the apex level, Honorable Chief Minister does meeting regularly every day. In fact, he has been doing meeting twice a day. And it started right after the first week of March, every day. I mean, there were meetings which were done in January and February to do the preparedness if things happen, things goes wrong. But since March 1st week, we have this institutional arrangement where the chief, the officers concerned, around 15 departments officers, are every day discussing what we are doing, what has been the result, and what we are going to do further. When it comes to urban development, we started with the first week, we started with how do we make people aware about social distancing. That was taken as a challenge. What we are going to do with the environmental sanitation, and how we are going to deal with, if need be, places to identify for quarantining the people. This was the city challenge. But by the time we had lockdown, and that changed the entire dynamics, because by that time already, I believe municipalities are doing this job of making people aware about how to do hand washing, how to do social distancing. But I think the media is full of it, and people are by and large aware of it. Right from the rural to urban, everywhere people are aware of these slogans or these messages, I would say. So that part of creating awareness about social distancing or awareness about hand washing, prevention measures, all these are already achieved, I would say. It has to continue, but it has been achieved. As far as places to identify quarantine facility, immediately everybody swung in, and by and large, I believe not only in UP but in entire country, that has not become a problem for India, where we have not been able to identify places to quarantine people if need has been come. Now, coming to the environmental sanitation, which has been always a regular, I would say, duty of urban local body. Challenge has been definitely, initially there was a challenge because there has been always a fear among, I would say, the staff while working in the areas, particularly in those areas where there are 2-3 challenges when you are trying to clean the city. First is obviously when you have a lockdown, how do you transport your staff, particularly the staff which has been relying on the public transport. So when public transport is not there, how do you manage that? That has been the first major challenge. The second obviously has been related to the fear of the staff to work in particularly the areas if the area has found a suspicious case or say positive case. So the PPE definitely has become a major issue now. I mean, obviously we have been getting PPE for the sanitary workers, but then whether the PPE has to be of the grade of a medical practitioner or a sanitation worker can work with a different kind of PPE, that becomes an issue. How do you dispel the fear of your staff that, okay, fine, if you don't get a doctor's grade PPE, still you can work with another kind of PPE. So that because the word PPE is used in a very generic sense. So how do you do that? Third was obviously the issue of how do you sanitize at such a large scale. I mean, you have been doing street sweeping, but when it comes to sanitization and the kind of standards which has come up with sanitization, whether the urban local bodies have those kind of sanitizers, if the factories are not working, industries are not there, shops are not open, from where do you procure these things? So the challenges we have met, I mean, on all these challenges, for example, on the sanitizers front, I would say there has been innovation in UP and probably across the country now it is happening, where all the distilleries were asked, they were given licenses within 2 days. And I believe this one innovation has definitely solved our problems of having adequate supply of sanitizers. This was one of the innovations. So all the distilleries, all the sugar mills which has been functioning along with the distilleries, they all got the licenses to manufacture sanitizers, and we have now, I mean, there has been never a challenge on the sanitizing front, which immediately, I mean, when it came to as a standard of hypochlorite, we were worried, or the sanitizers, we were worried from where we will get so much of sanitizer. As far as waste management is concerned, I believe it has been in the other way around, in a sense that there has been definitely lower pressure on the urban local bodies because of the lockdown during this period. So at the same time, a challenge of how do you see that this bio, it is supposed to be, if it's infected area or the mask which in large number of people are using, so how do you dispose it as a biomedical waste? Definitely that has been a challenge to tie up. not all the urban local bodies, bigger municipal corporations do have this capacity on their own to have incinerations and keeping it segregated and incinerating. But the smaller urban local bodies, they do had a challenge, and one had to coordinate with the biomedical waste facilities for doing this disposal of large number of masks or otherwise waste which was coming from the quarantine facilities. Now the job during the course of journey started becoming much more wider. The next thing which came to us as a challenge with the lockdown was how do you ensure social security in the city area. That became much more important. People found during the lockdown you have less complaint of street sweeping because there are no activities, but then there was much bigger challenge of how do you take care of your street vendor or the people who were working in the cities, construction workers. We all have seen on the visuals of the TV or the media what had happened, how people got worried about social security. Here I would say that every state must have followed. We all know that everybody is trying to have its own solutions of social security. Central government came up with social security program. What urban local bodies in UP have done, I'll wrap up in 1-2 minutes more, but that's important point. For ensuring social security, we have enlisted all the vendors and every family which requires it, apart from the cash, which is going to be direct benefit transfer in their bank accounts. We have also been providing through community kitchen and I would say about almost 10 lakh food packets every day is getting distributed through these municipalities with coordination of, definitely there are various voluntary organizations with whom we coordinated. So what has been, I would now say learning. Learning has been, I would say 3. A, digital platform has been really very helpful. Everybody in the government has learned that. I would say that from the government front. I mean, private sector does adopt itself, but government takes time to adopt itself to innovations. But this has been a major learning for everyone down the line. From top to bottom, we have been either using Zoom or Cisco or NIC, but this has definitely become, I would say, a change dynamics and a positive change dynamics. How to use technology to disseminate information and messages down the line within seconds. That's one. Second very good learning, which I would say has been that we have been reading informal sector plays major role, and we actually had to coordinate with informal sector to ensure our cities continue running. So tying up with street vendors, your local kirana shop become much more important than probably a big online store. That has been a major learning, and cities, if cities has to grow, inclusiveness and local vendors or localization has to be taken into account along the side of what we say from the global parameters. The local becomes important. Waste management, definitely, which is our day to day. Often people are now saying that Earth, probably in a very, I would say, lighter way, but definitely Earth during this lockdown, there are very many negative impacts. One positive impact has been that environment has benefited. People can go on studying. There will be studies how, I mean, you could never have found a data to study air pollution or water pollution. The way the data is going to come up in last 4 or 5 weeks, if somebody would analyze, we would get the source and how to control it. Challenge, last point. Revenue has been affected. March is not only a revenue month for all government organizations, but majorly for municipalities. April again. So how municipalities whose the revenue side has to be taken into account in future, how we are going to tackle it. I believe we are holding on and we will find a solution. Now I'm open to if quickly any questions are going to be there for me.
Thank you, Mr. Yadav, for covering the topic very comprehensively. In fact, you have covered all the aspects that are required to be addressed during the course of the webinar this morning. I think with the approval of the organizers, can we take the questions towards the end? So I think, assuming that
I can see on chat too many questions. It's very difficult to respond. I mean, I can respond to the individuals if I get a list over a period of 1 or 2 days. but responding on the chat there are I mean, I could see there are people who have raised certain questions. So I can take through of that, whatever moderator would suggest to me, but it would be difficult to respond immediately on the chat.
What I think the system, I mean, the host, I think knows that the questions are kind of flashed on the screen of the speakers, after some time. I mean, you are kind of listing the questions. Am I right?
There's one question, Mr. Yadav.
Yeah. Sorry, I can't hear you.
Yeah. How does access to clean water for washing hands ensured in informal communities or settlements? Also, what about basic hygiene in these areas?
Okay, so basically the challenge has been, if you informal sector, meaning I would say two: A, the place of say trading. For example, let us say a mandi, where still we are open and people are coming there. That's one. Two, obviously, probably we are referring to the, I would say, slums, which are densely populated, not having pipe water supply in every household. So how do you take the message across them, and how they are actually being able to practice? I believe if I'm getting the question correct, then I can answer probably. Is it the question?
We can take it offline. I think we can
Okay,
take that.
fine. So I would say that this has been definitely in the, I mean, while we started our awareness campaign in the first week of March, this challenge of how do we reach to the densely populated areas or otherwise informal settlements, which are like in the nature of slums in the city area, where we don't have organized habitation or a planned way of habitation where you could easily just send a message. Here it was just not sending the message, but also putting up the infrastructure. So the responsibility of the municipalities has been, in these cases, not only sending across the messages to the workers, but at the same time also putting up the infrastructure. So there has been either a tanker, or they have at local level innovated to put up a storage tank along with a wash basin, putting up soaps and sanitizers on these slum areas so that people could use it. This has been a primary. So the difference is across the, whereas when it comes to vulnerable section or the informal settlement, the practice is taken further to provide the infrastructure as well, and we have been providing.
Participants is fairly appreciable. I think we'll take the questions towards the end. Now let's look at the issue from the perspective of smart city missions. And can I request Mr. Sameer Jain to highlight how the smart cities are handling the issue, particularly the strategy, about the COVID-19, and how technology, as Mr. Yadav said, the use of technology, digital technology, has emerged as a very important area for the management. So I request Mr. Sameer Jain to focus in more details in policy perspective on this issue. The subject of his discussion, his speech, will be state and ULB's perspective in COVID-19 response and management. Mr. Jain, please.
Thank you, Mr. Jain. Before I begin, I must thank Mr. Anurag Yadav to his team and him for being on the ground while many of us actually operate out of our homes. So, sir, we are very humble and very inspired. But there are two professions I'm not very jealous of lately. One is that of an astrologer and one of an economist. I really don't know what's going on and what would happen on the 4th of May. Because every day the world around us is changing economically as well as behaviorally as well. Just mid-March, we were talking about the growth being restricted to 5% or lesser. And just this early April, it became 1.7%. We really don't. And the reasons are not very systemic, but mostly behavioral, as I said. People afraid of what would mean to go back out. Would there be a new normal? The organizations, the people in terms of the investments are going to be really thinking twice as to how do they go forward. Social distancing, the international borders being sealed. So how does the supply chain get affected, or does it come back to the normal? The government policies, the fiscal and the monetary efforts, etc. These are many, many things which are very, very macro in nature, which are not fully known, and hence to know what would happen is very, very difficult tasked to do. Now, but if I look at this issue, this pandemic, vis-a-vis other natural disasters or financial crisis that we have seen, some of us have seen in our lifetime, uh, this is more of a sudden shock that we have gone through, and hence I strongly believe the recovery, at least from an Indian context, would be much sharper than in the other cases like the financial crisis of late 2000s, etc. So if you were to really look at this V kind of a curve in terms of the revival, what is important is for really us to understand which sector could lead that revival. And urban, I mean, not only the subject of today, but also in reality, that everyone strongly believes that the urban transformation is what would lead the revival of it. Just to look at it in terms of numbers, the Government of India, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, has identified about $2.5 trillion worth of investments in capital and operation maintenance by 2030 to make India deliver on its urban promise. The way the migration has happened, the state contribute, the urban populations contributing 65% to the nation's GDP, just tells us how important urban sector is. Not only in terms of how it has been mostly affected, and that's what we are all worried about today and gathering here to learn from each other, but also the role it can take. But what is important to know is what are the macro views, or at least at the national level, because I was asked to talk about some of the national conversations that are happening. What is important to understand is that it's just not one sector, but all of the sectors which are under distress, whether it is tourism, hospitality, transportation, energy, etc., etc. And urban, while it provides a factor of productions, may not necessarily, if I talk from a state urban development department or ULB perspective, may not be able to directly influence the revival of each of these sectors which contribute to the GDP that we talk about. The supply chains have been disrupted. The labor force is all scattered. We have seen a reverse migration of a very unique kind. There are massive financial constraints, both in the public and the private sector. And more importantly, the lack of demand. Where's the consumption? And that's where it becomes a very unique responsibility that these ULBs take, because of, let's call them a project manager in this scenario, to not only do their job best in terms of carrying on with the urban agenda and the services that they have promised to offer to the citizens, but also create the ecosystem so that the rest of the industries as well find their way back in. So some things that can be done. Now, a lot of conversation today is all around what the cities are doing, what are the best practices that the national government, state governments are taking to fight this virus. But in my opinion, these are all not, and a lot of good work is being done. But if I really look at what has to happen is a behavioral change leading to institutional changes, and this has to happen at all the three levels of the government. Today, I mean, we've been all hearing about states having run out of cash. So where is the question of reviving the economy comes in? Cities are still heavily dependent upon the grants, and their own revenues dried up or not institutionally very strong. So at the center level, a lot of efforts are being taken, but I am of the opinion that maybe we need to look at the creation of some national intermediary which can really aggregate the fundings that can be resourced from the rest of the world, not only now, but even for the next few years, when India is still offering the biggest growth potential for anyone else. The central government coming in, providing certain sovereign guarantee, really gives the cities and the state access to low-cost capital. Similarly, if I talk about state, because urban is still a state subject, the question is, what is the role the state can take? And here again, I believe in institutional change. The industrial development, the infrastructure development corporation, urban development corporations, which were created for the purpose of creating a city level consistent urban transformation, whether it is project development, whether it is creating access to finance, whether it is providing technical competencies, monitoring the urban development, so that every city in the state is contributing consistently to the state development. So is it the time? Then coming to the cities, and that's where I think the bigger challenge lies. If you look at ULBs, typically ULBs are always dependent upon the grants from the central government or the state government in form of these various missions. The text and the non-text-based revenues are very inconsistent, to say the least, and their services or their area of control is limited to, and this is where most of the conversations are, whether it is solid waste management, sanitation, water services, but never transformational in nature. But at the same time, there are many agencies such as the Jal Nigams, the PWDs, and many other parastatal agencies which are experts at what they do. And hence, the need for us to really look at how can principal-agent relationship be created at the city's level, so that the ULBs can be responsible for what the citizens need, and then collaborates with the other agencies to deliver on the promises that it makes. And so many more things that have to be done. But the constraints are there right now in terms of, as I said, access to finance, their own finances is stuck, the capacity constraints, and as I mentioned, many capacities. And that's where I think the role of smart cities become very important in terms of the revival, not only because it sounds very glamorous, but also because this is, if you look at the principles of smart cities, whether it talks about the convergence model, one of the only missions which talks about convergence, which leads to coordination, collaboration between many agencies, urban and non-urban. It talks about citizen centricity. It talks about all of the sectors which need to work together as part of an integrated planning. Now, because it was a learning exercise, but I strongly believe if we look at the principles, then smart cities are best positioned to really collaborate and bring about the overall economic revival that the cities and the countries need. So two ways that we can talk about, right? One is, what are the big picture initiatives that can be taken up? Number one, because the money is dried up, there is a possibility, and which is a reality, that many of the projects that are envisioned or underway may have to be relooked at. So is it a good time for these cities, along with its set of partners, to really look at the complete set of portfolio of the projects which create the largest socioeconomic impact to the citizens? Looking at the complete set of contracts that are underway is another actions at a institution level that can be looked at. We will soon see the migrations happening. Now, we have seen migrations of 10, 15 years undone in just a period of one month. And when the migrants come back, how do we rehabilitate them? Those are the kind of discussions and the decisions have to be taken as well. We talked about, Anurag sir also talked about the city, the Disaster Management Act, but there are many provisions of it which I don't think were even known, because we have never seen anything like this before. So is it a time for each city to have a city continuity plan which goes beyond disasters into economic revival as well? Use of technology, etc., could be really looked at. Just to give you an example, 45 of these smart cities have command and control centers, and each of these, in a very short span of time, became COVID war rooms and were able to support the administration in terms of tracking the movement of this virus, tracking the patients, the infrastructure access that is available, and all that. And that's the best practice. And in fact, somebody was asked me, what are some of the best practices that the cities are adopting during this time? And I was thinking that why should I not look at the best practices that the cities adopted even before the pandemic came in, which came to the rescue, which came to the support of the overall administration. And that's what we have to look at. To close this, we also need to look at, when I talk about the portfolio rationalization, I think it's high time we look at the way we design the portfolio of projects for smart cities, and can they be now differently seen, not only with respect to the near-term issues, but also how do we bring about institutional changes? As I talked about, when the labor migration happens again, can we rehabilitate them? Can we have some kind of labor management systems? Can we ensure that the housing for all works in tandem with this rehabilitation, so that these laborers find a better housing facility as well, and they are better integrated into the systems so that their livelihoods are taken care of effectively? Health, right? We have talked about health in pockets here and there in smart cities, but this is the time because the behaviors are going to change, and health and hygiene is going to become now very integral to the parts of the people's lives. So can we now look at the CSCs and the PSCs to have much more strong physical and digital infrastructure with respect to healthcare? We need to really look at the municipal finances. Today, if the state funds dry up or the central funds dry up, are the cities self-sufficient to carry on with the revival and the services that they have to deliver? Can we look at the municipal finances, as in property taxes, etc., to be looked at? Scaling up the command control center. Why should only the 100 smart cities benefit from this massive investment in the digital infrastructure? Can we really upgrade the command?
Yeah, Mr. Jain, would you like to wrap up, please?
Yes, I'm just in a couple of minutes. So can we really scale up the architecture of this command control centers, which goes beyond municipal services and integrates with the rest of the state functions as well? Another important issue is the schooling, right? I mean, every typical classroom has 40, 45 students. How does it work when the schools open up? So do we now really need to bring in the learning management systems well integrated with the teachers, students, and the parents, without having that need to always have a physical setup, because we do not want the children's academic year to be affected, and so on and so forth. So there are a lot of new types of thinking that are developing, which can actually make smart city the right platform, because the whole concept of smart city is a city which is able to evolve itself with the changing demands, both internal and external. So I believe there is a recognition and the realization among the functionaries at these three levels. And I strongly believe that smart city, the way it was envisioned, is ready to take on the new challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jain, for highlighting some very, very critical strategic issues, which I think policymakers will have to really address, even during COVID, but particularly post COVID-19. Now let's, I think, go to the awareness creation part of COVID-19 strategy. Mr. Yadav was talking about that a lot of awareness has already been generated. A lot of IC is happening through different media. But I still feel that there's a huge scope for improvising our awareness messages, etc., particularly in areas, high density areas, where social distancing is not possible. We call it informal settlements or old, Gautans or old settlements in the city, old part of the city. So I think let's look at what kind of strategy we followed for making people aware in such areas in particular. Well, we all know that UNICEF is the global leader in knowledge management, public health, and hygiene. So let's hear from Ms. Maria, the WASH specialist at the UNICEF in Delhi. What kind of strategy do you think can be followed in this context in particular? She's going to speak on support to states in COVID-19 and particularly on importance of WASH in this context. So, Maria, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for giving this opportunity to speak a little bit more about water, sanitation, hygiene, including those very critical behaviors and engagement with the community. I'm going to share my screen because I have a PowerPoint. I hope you can all see this. Okay, so let me start with giving a very, very brief overview on why water, sanitation, hygiene is so critical to combat COVID-19. So we all know COVID-19 can be directly spread through sneezing or coughing, the droplets that go from your mouth to the face of the other person. It can also spread through fingers and through surfaces, and that's why it's so important to wash hands, do not touch your face, wear a mask, and regularly clean surfaces. On the right, there is a very nice infographic developed by the Technical University of Delft in the Netherlands. I won't speak about it in detail, but in case the presentation is available for others after this call, I just want to highlight that the virus is found in sewage water, but we're not sure how high the risk of contamination is through sewage. It was also found in water, but it has a very poor survival rate above 20 degrees. So I think the key message from here is that it's very important that we wash our hands regularly with soap, we clean surfaces regularly, but that we also ensure that the water we drink and we use for cooking and cleaning is safe and ideally chlorinated, and that we take proper care of the wastewater treatment, and also our sanitation workers should be protected. So moving on to the next. So now if we look at the urban landscape in India, I would say generally on average, the people in urban areas have slightly better access to water and sanitation services than in rural areas. However, there are pockets where the access is actually worse than in rural areas. And you'll see on the right, you see one of the community toilet complexes that you can find in Mumbai. It's one of the areas where UNICEF works with the government. So what we can say is that that around the Swachh Bharat mission, urban estimates that 20% of the urban households use these type of community toilets, and these toilets actually become a potential source of infection, especially when they are very dirty like this. We also know that around 70% of the urban poor, which is the lowest wealth quintile, actually depends on a shared water supply. That means people have to go out of their house and collect their water. And again, this is a potential risk for people to get in touch with others, get in touch with services, and therefore get infected. So it's very critical that we look at these types of shared resources. You see that this lockdown impacts everyone slightly differently. For us living on the top floors of the nice condominium buildings with our smartphones and our TVs and Netflix, we complain, but we actually have a pretty good life. But the people, our delivery boys, the people that living in the slums or the informal settlements, the sanitation workers, the people that have to go out every day on the streets and are in touch with a lot of other people regularly, they are the ones that are most at risk, including the people that work in the health facilities, including the people that work in quarantine facilities or in migrant shelters. There's a lot of migrants right now that are stranded. They want to go home, they cannot go home, they cannot pay their rent, and they don't have anywhere to go, and they don't have access to resources. Of course, there are a lot of measures already ongoing to ensure that these people have some kind of access to resources. So in this presentation, I'm just going to talk a little bit of what these people ideally should have access to when you look at water and sanitation to prevent them from getting sick. Looking specifically at women and children, because UNICEF works very closely with these beneficiaries, with these population groups. So when we look at women, they actually face a higher risk of exposure because often women are in the front line and interacting with communities. We have our ashas, we have our Anganwadi workers. A lot of women are frontline health workers. So they have higher risk, and therefore they should have access to personal protective equipment. Actually more likely to take up any preventative behaviors. So involve women in the response. And a very good example of one of our offices in Gujarat where they're working with local self-help groups. Here on the left, you see the picture of women producing masks and being part of that response. We also need to understand women's domestic burden is exacerbated. You know, they have an increased share of the household responsibilities and now also additional childcare responsibilities because the schools are closed. And lastly, children are now out of school. They have less exposure to hygiene education, which often happens at the school. But once these schools open, they can be an additional risk because a lot of schools are currently used as shelters, as quarantine centers, and those schools need to be cleaned and properly cleaned before they open again. There is a specific book for health workers, Anganwadi workers, Ashas and ANMs, and other community workers on COVID-19, how to protect themselves, what are the key behaviors. The booklet was prepared by WHO and UNICEF and endorsed and released by the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. And there is also global guidance on how can you ensure that schools are safe for children once they go back. So I have just listed a few of these resources at the bottom. They're available on the internet. So what we can do is provide them with additional water storage so that they spend less time at the community water points. They don't have to go twice a day or every day. They could go every alternative day and then reduce their exposure to other people. Similarly, sanitary napkins might not be accessible to some women. Now, if we do distribution of, let's say, water or soaps or other hygiene items, we have to be very careful. We don't want to create any gatherings. We have to ensure that there is physical distancing, or otherwise distribution could be done door to door or in very small groups, timing the distribution rather than trying to get thousands of people in one point at the same time. So we have to be very careful when we distribute. We also have to ensure that we need to look at the community toilets. So how many toilets are there for the number of people, and maybe provide additional toilets on a temporary basis for these people, and create physical distancing nudges around the community water points, around the community toilets. We've all seen these circles on the floor outside of shops. We can think in similar ways, circles or lines, having dedicated entry and exit points where people do not use the same door, but use a different door to come in and go out. There is regular disinfection that is required, also hand washing before entering the toilet and after leaving, not only after using the toilet. So these are some of the measures that we can take. It requires a combination of the hygiene promotion and community engagement activities with the physical infrastructure and the supplies that people actually require. It also requires training. So the people that take care of these wash services in these slum areas, they need to understand what to do and why it is so important, and they need to be protected. We should also think of all the waste collectors and the waste pickers that actually live in these slum areas and that have a higher risk of getting sick. So UNICEF supported the Ministry of Jal Shakti on social distancing or physical distancing, both in rural and in urban areas. These are some screenshots from the recommendations in urban areas. It's still under draft, so it's not yet finalized, but these are some of the suggestions that we have conveyed to the ministry. So moving on to shelters, and almost through with the presentation. I think when we look at shelters, these are often temporary setups. So first we need to understand—
1 minute left, roughly.
Okay,
yeah.
Yes, I'm almost done. So we just need to understand what is it, what are the facilities in these shelters. So, and then train the management staff on infection prevention and control in these shelters. And then again, ensure that the wash services and supplies are there. And one innovation I'd like to share here is that when we look at hand washing stations with soap, which is something that can easily be set up in around community toilets, around water points, around marketplaces, bus stands, etc. We should ensure that they are not operated by hands, but by foot or elbow, and that soap is there. So we have produced a small compendium of layouts, including bills of quantities and cost estimates. And this is readily available for anyone who would like to scale this up. I have a list of recommendations here, which I'll put on the screen, but basically it's a combination of everything that I have shared in the presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Maria. I think is an excellent presentation on the subject of creating sensitization and also like do's and don'ts for social distancing while providing access to urban poor to the urban services. Now let's quickly go to Mr. Srinivas, and I request him to give a policy perspective of the Government of India and guidelines issued by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. He's going to speak on planning intervention for better management of pandemic, how smart cities are tackling COVID-19. I'll request all the remaining three speakers to be a little more crisp considering the time limit that we have.
Can the admin run the presentation, please? Or should I share my presentation?
Please share your presentation.
Okay. You can see now presentation?
Not yet.
Now you can see?
Yeah. Let's come on.
Okay. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunities, and good morning all the distinguished speakers and the participants. Let me just quickly, in 10 minutes, I'll finish my presentation. I've shared this, you just see the graph, even in USA, the deaths per lakh population, this is as on April 2, you just see all large metros, urban counties, large metros, almost it is 3.98, and most of the big cities in USA, they are, really suffering from the COVID-19. And as far as in India, I have just compiled this data. These are the top 15 cities which have been seriously affected by the COVID. And you just see that the density of cities, I mean, these are all million plus cities, and except Hyderabad, Coimbatore, and Jodhpur, all are covered under Smart City Mission. And you just see the density pattern, And of course, Mumbai, it has got, as on the 20th April, the figure was 2187, and now it has crossed 3,000. And it's a serious matter, Let me go to the next. Yeah, I have, inserted this slide intentionally. You just see that the number of households, 37.1% or 32.1% in urban areas have got only one room, whereas 30.6% of total households have got two rooms. So virtually half of the households in our urban areas are living in either one or two room. You can just see it. One room and two room together constitute 62%. So it will be a huge challenge how we are going to ensure social distancing when majority of population lives in either one or two room. Mr. Samir Jain also mentioned about the informal sector, and Mr. Anurag Yadav also highlighted about the migrants. Just I'm sharing the figures. We have as per 2011 census, 52 crore working population. That it is likely because census 2021 work has been stopped, and it will take another 2 years to get figures. But a rough estimate, around 55 crore population is working population. And out of that, around 14 crore or roughly 30% of the working population is migrant laborers. And it is estimated, it's not an authentic data, but some estimate has been made by the, it was reflected in 16 March Times of India News, that 50% of the, migrant population have gone to their native states. And it's around 5 crore. That's a huge, number. Now, again, what could be the impact? Loss of livelihood, loss of shelter. Once they come back, whether they'll be retained in their, accommodation, because most of them, they are put in rent and they might not have paid rent for past 2-3, months, and the owner may not allow them. And again, sudden increase in rental values. All of a sudden, if they come to, they return back to, their cities, definitely there will be impact on rental values. Loss of savings. Now everybody is aware that like taxi drivers, plumbers, carpenters, construction laborers, they are running out of savings, and it will be a huge challenge that once the lockdown comes, it's over, and then they come back and get to their work. So it will be a huge challenge. Increase in liabilities and debts. That's, I think somebody has to really see, in fact, Ministry of Finance should work out the policies that how we are going to ensure that they should overcome their liabilities and debts. And of course, after pandemic, it's going to last, newspaper reports are saying that it may last up to 1 year. but whether our workforce, will it be demoralized after coming back to their workplace? There will be always fear of, virus. They may catch virus, so there will be continuous fear. Yes, from urban planning point of view, let me tell about these guidelines. I don't know. I think most of the planners are aware that we have circulated this URDP guidelines and model building bylaws. Basically, URDP guidelines, it's a guide for state town planning department to prepare master plan. And within that URDP guidelines as well as model building bylaws, we will have to revisit, certain FAR prescriptions, density allocations. Now, the moment we are going to get the disaggregated data, then we'll have to really correlate that hotspot vis-a-vis highly dense pockets in the cities. So the data flow, of course, smart city is going to release data that how we can correlate a hotspot vis-a-vis density. Then intensification of land uses along transit corridor. We are recommending TOD. I mean, there has been a TOD policy. Some state governments have also gone through TOD policy, and it is going to, if you're going to implement TOD policies, it is going to intensify land use and there will be more footfalls. And again, mixed use development, we need to revisit mixed use development. City sprawl and compact development, there has been a continuous debate. And provision of open spaces. Now we'll have to really seriously think about provision of open spaces. And of course, health infrastructure. Of course, we have given the, suggestions to ministry. In fact, this was prior to lockdown. It was the suggestions were given in the first week of March. We had suggested that limit human to human transmission. In fact, previous speaker also mentioned that this will be a huge channel, that how we are going to really ensure social distancing. And again, care for patients, including providing optimized care for infected patients. Let me tell you, I think before the pandemic, we never thought of isolated wards. Now we have to really ensure that if we are going to approve layout or building plan for hospitals, clear-cut, marking of space for isolated ward has to be ensured. I remember, in early in 1990s, we used to have a lot of, bomb blasts. In fact, I was also a victim of a bomb blast. It took place in ITO. At that time, hospitals were absolutely ready for treating the, injured patients. So similarly, we'll have to really see that once we issue the occupancy completion certificate for hospitals, we have to ensure that they must have dedicated space for isolation ward. All hospitals must be geotagged. Building should be properly sanitized. And while preparing the building, design, it has to be ensured that proper sunlight is accessed in the buildings, especially the hospital buildings that are frequented by patients. I mean, these things will, once you issue the completion certificate, we'll have to, really, inspect on all these parameters. Of course, now today in newspaper also, it has been mentioned that virus has started from, animal source. This is typically, why we recommended at that time. We were getting the visuals of, Wuhan animal, that market. And this will have to really ensure that the location of slaughterhouse has to be in accordance with the guidelines. We have given clear-cut guidance, and under no circumstances the meat products should be sold in open and should be appropriately refrigerated and sealed in box. And this we have strongly recommended to our ministry. And of course, GIS mapping for vulnerable areas, smart cities have gone ahead because there has been an interface of GIS and command and control center. In fact, Samir Jain also mentioned about that how the smart cities were converted into, COVID war rooms. And of course, perform routine environmental cleaning. Now it has to become, habit in all the assembly buildings, whether it is office buildings, malls, cinema halls, stadiums. We will have to really ensure that disinfection through routine cleaning has to be there. And this we have strongly recommended to our ministry so that we can further send the guidelines to. And this has been effort. I'm 2 minutes. I'm winding up. This has been, SAP University has recommended that while revising the development plan for Ahmedabad Urban Development Authority area, you have to ensure risk sensitivity urban plan, public health plan, as well as sustainability and urban resilience plans for building better urban city. So this has been, efforts of smart cities. Like 20 cities have converted COVID war room. Around 26 cities have a 24/7 helpline for citizen grievances pertaining to COVID, and a variable message display system. 19 cities, not 197. 19 cities have done, and of course sanitization. Uh, Also, they have done. Most of the smart cities have gone for sanitation, and ICC for city surveillance and monitoring. 13 cities have done, and similarly, number of smart cities have taken a lot of initiatives towards COVID-19. Just a way forward in 1 minute. In fact, now a lot of discussions are taking place. Should we have a national policy for relief and rehabilitation for COVID-19? And it becomes very necessary, so that we need to have a representation of various ministries, including health, housing and urban affairs, home affairs, uh, the DPIIT, Ministry of Ministry of Finance, as well as Ministry of Rural Development. And focus should be on providing package in terms of livelihood often in case migrants have lost job, plus monetary benefits. Again, detailed analysis of hotspot. We are awaiting, how we can get the disaggregated, data. Then we can do the detailed analysis. Of course, revisiting our development policies as well as TODs, and these have to be, incorporated in the master plan. We'll have to discuss. And again, last, I will conclude with this. Focus should be on redistribution of population along with decentralization of economic activities. We have been, as a planner, regional planner, we have totally forgotten the regional plan. And I am a firm believer that this will definitely create economic opportunities to blue collar workers. You need to redistribute population. You need to have decentralization policies. And then only, we will be able to contain this virus. Thank you very much for for giving me the opportunity to make this presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Srinivas. This is an excellent presentation covering all the aspects that we should look into, particularly going by the experience of COVID-19 and how we should not wait for another pandemic to hit us and kind of review the overall urbanization strategy. This is an excellent presentation. I'll quickly go to Dr. Varsi now, who is going to talk on tracking risk and impacts in solid waste management in cities during and after COVID pandemic. Dr. Varsi, please. I think you are not audible.
Yeah.
Fine.
Good morning, everybody. As many things has been told by many of the panelists, I just want to be focused on the waste management practices right now, what to be followed, and then based on the lesson learned, what in future we can do in terms of waste management, sanitation, and safe drinking water. So I think now in a big way, we have to focus on all these things. So my first point is that if we really want to manage the waste, particularly the solid waste situation generated out of this pandemic, we have to first categorize the various streams of the waste, and then we have to make a plan to deal with that. So first of all, I will focus upon that what can be the probable categories wherein we can segregate the waste. So first will be the waste generated from the various streams like hospitals, from the quarantine centers, and from the houses of where positive case has been found. So in first category, we have to keep all these houses. Then we have to come up with a dedicated vehicles, covered vehicles, wherein we can collect all this infectious waste, and it can be sent to the common biomedical waste treatment facilities where it can be incinerated. Secondly, we have to look into the containment areas or the basically epicenters. So again, in most of the urban areas, what most of the cities has done in the containment areas, they have, I think they have sealed the entire containment areas and nothing is being allowed to move into that areas. So again, special dedicated vehicles should be deployed in all these areas, so as the waste generated from these areas, from the household waste, can be collected, and also the particularly all the PPEs which is being generated while doing the disinfection, and even should be collected separately. For example, in Indore, what we have done is that in our door-to-door collection vehicles, we have fix up a special compartment for collection of all this waste, particularly this PPE, all types of PPEs, masks, gloves, head caps, even if we can have some, use some this full body covers and all. So that all can be collected into this third bin, and this through this third bin, it can be collected at a transfer station, and from there it can be shifted to the common biomedical facility for further treatment and disposal. Thirdly, we have to look into the collection of waste, because in this pandemic situation, the number of hospitals has been divided into categories. That is green, yellow, and red. So yellow and red are dealing with the patients, positive patients, or the suspected patients. And green are dealing with the normal patients having various type of diseases other than COVID-19. So again, it is very important that we have to have a dedicated system to run it, to collect that biomedical and infectious waste generated from all that hospitals. And again, that is to be sent. Thirdly, whatsoever waste is collected from the containment areas should be taken to the landfills, and it is to be landfilled in a engineered landfill in a scientific manner. The fourth point is, it is very important right now, as very rightly said by Mr. Yadav, that the quantum of waste, the generation of quantum of waste because of the lockdown has come down. So it is very important that we sweep our roads every day, we collect the waste from the households, and then we process it. So processing of waste is very important. These are the points which I want to raise when it comes to the waste management, particularly solid waste management. Now, it is very important that apart from solid waste management, we have to look very seriously on liquid waste also, because most of liquid waste is being generated. So at least whatsoever COVID liquid waste is generated from all this COVID hospitals where we are dealing with the positive cases, at least immediately disinfection into the collection tanks should be done. Disinfection with 1% hypochlorite should be done, so as if it reaches to any water source or to nalas or to sewage treatment plant, wherever it goes, it does not carry the contaminants. So that care has to be taken. And thirdly, it is very important that I want to tell about what are the lessons we have learned. The lessons we have learned is that, as very rightly said by Mr. Samir Jain, that we have to now, particularly, there is lack of budget, there is a shortage of money everybody will be facing after this pandemic, particularly the urban local bodies. So particularly in all 100 smart cities, the budget being earmarked for smart cities can be in a proper manner used for this sanitation, solid waste management, and water supply. The restructuring of the entire plan may be required, so as the money available over there can be utilized. Thirdly, it is very important, as Maria has told and Mr. Srinivasan, that we have to focus on the strategies for sanitization of the cities, sanitization of the buildings, inside sanitization, as well as the sanitization of the cities. Right now, what we have done, we have converted our fire tenders or the tankers or the sewage sucking machines into all these sanitizing machines, which is not appropriate. Okay, for the need of the hour, we Indians are very innovative. We have done that, and we are dealing with the situation. But when we look into the future, it is very that all the urban local body should plan, should have dedicated proper infrastructure, proper vehicles and equipments for sanitization of the city, for cleaning of the inside and outside cleaning of the cities, and particularly, as very rightly said, that we should have isolation wards, and particularly sanitization of this isolation ward, sanitization of the OTs, sanitization of the, thirdly, all our manpower involved into the urban local bodies as well as into the health should be given training. Proper training should be given to them to deal with all the type of waste being generated, to deal with all this situation. This is what I want to tell. And because there is a shortage of time, I just want to conclude my things over here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Varsi, for highlighting the key issues in waste management. I'll now request Dr. Masood Malik to give his presentation. He's going to speak on impact of COVID-19 on urban infrastructure and business. And he's, I'm sure, going to bring the perspective of a sanitation service provider with a huge experience in this sector. Dr. Malik, please.
Thank you, Mr. Jain, and a very good afternoon to my distinguished panelists and colleagues who have joined us this afternoon. I will not spend too many minutes on the slides themselves because I want to leave some time for Q&A towards the end. But a very quick introduction to who we are. We are Ramki Enviro. We operate across India and in many international locations in the environmental infrastructure and waste management space. So what I'm trying to talk about today is share some perspectives and learnings literally from the front lines. And these front lines are not just the mega cities like Delhi, Chennai, or Singapore, or Dubai, or Abu Dhabi, etc., where we operate, but also, you know, the Ludhiana Sagars and the Katnis and the Bilaspurs and the Madurais of the world. So some of these experiences. To start with, let me confess that that as an environmental professional and as a waste manager, the rate of change associated with this particular crisis has been a surprise for us, and therefore the lockdown and our response to that was brought on a number of challenges. I've tried to sort of highlight those challenges in under two buckets. The first one is infrastructure. So let me just very quickly talk about what kind of challenges we faced when it came to infrastructure. The first and the most obvious one was that does the country and do our cities have the biomedical waste management capacity to deal with the kind of waste that we are generating and we are likely to generate. The second question that came around infrastructure was, how do you actually collect potentially infectious COVID waste from areas that you are not normally collecting from, residential areas, so basically designated quarantine zones or hotspot areas, etc., which are not really hospitals or healthcare establishments. And the third point, which I think a number of my the speakers have already brought out, city level disinfection infrastructure. So I think the important aspect is when quantities of waste moves from kilograms scale to tons scale, which is what we are seeing and what has happened, when we start seeing massive amounts of shortages when it comes to basic infrastructure like personal protective equipment, and when some categories of infrastructure, which is like city level disinfection equipment, is just not there, how do you respond to such a challenge? And I just wanted to talk about some experiences and learnings that we have had. I think the one thing that I have learned in the last few weeks is the agility and the resilience of our societies and our business is just amazing. Today, biomedical waste is not limited to be treated in biomedical waste facilities. There are larger thermal treatment facilities associated with hazardous waste incinerators that are designed and they operate at tons per hour, sorry. And then there are even waste to energy facilities that can actually treat hundreds and thousands of tons per day. And therefore the ability for us to treat these wastes in areas where such facilities are available is definitely there. Also, the rate at which technology and not just high tech, but also low tech is coming to our aid. We saw experiences from examples that Maria shared around foot operated wash centers, right from there all the way up to the modified disinfection equipment that have been put into use across the country is a testament to the resilience of the country. That said, I think there are some questions I wanted to raise today that have been on the back of our minds. The first, we talk about PPE and the fact that there is a PPE shortage, and we think of the PPE as being our primary defense against infection. Actually, PPE should be the last line of defense. And traditionally, if you look at layers of protection, there should be engineering controls and ways to isolate the individuals or the recipients from the hazard other than PPE. Similarly, we're talking about sanitization and the fact that at city levels, large sanitization efforts are going on. It's a bit like carpet bombing. But experiences in other countries and places where we have been operating tell us that targeted application is probably far more effective when it comes to sanitization than having a large scale sort of spray infrastructure, which is operating at a city level. And therefore the role of science in informing some of these decision making at the city level or the ULB level. Also, I think that some of the traditional principles of sanitization need to be thought through. The fact is that earlier what was easy to clean was seen to be more sanitary. But if you look at COVID-19, and this particular virus, it doesn't survive that much on cardboard, which is porous. It just survives for 4 or 5 hours. And on stainless steel and on plastics, it is actually surviving for 4 to 5 days. And therefore, your traditional sort of solutions or approaches towards sanitization obviously need to take into account this new learnings that are coming through. The second set of challenges that we faced when this challenge, when lockdown sort of hit us, was how do you maintain service continuity? We have about 20,000 people who just couldn't get to work, even if they wanted to. A lot of them didn't want to. And a lot of them were very worried about what will happen to them. Will they be safe? And will they be able to ensure that they do not become vectors of this infection in their communities and in their families? And I think I wanted to share some learnings there, where I think it is extremely important when the insurance industry let us down and was not able to come up with a product that could cover these 20,000 people, we had to do it ourselves. We had to put in place transport infrastructure. We had to put in place food and sanitation facilities, temporary housing that allowed the ability of these people to reach their place of work. A very important aspect that I wanted to touch upon was the fact that sometimes it is not the obvious that is the challenge. The obvious question in our minds was, do we have enough waste treatment capacity? My bigger challenge in my sites was, where will these people sleep? Because once they leave their villages, the village to come to work, the village elders don't want them to come back. They're like, you stay wherever you're going. We don't want you to come and go every day. Or how do we feed them in a way that is hygienic, maintain social distancing and safe? So for us, social distancing and food supply became a bigger sort of challenge, and therefore a bigger area of focus for us than actual waste management infrastructure. Transport infrastructure became a huge challenge for us, and we needed to respond to that. And one of the biggest challenges that I wanted to highlight today, which is the ability of our colleagues to face the social and cultural barriers to actually work in this at this point in time. There was a lot of perception that people did not need to go to work. And therefore, I think the way our societies have responded to this particular issue, we started a campaign called Out There For You, and the way our communities sort of responded to our workers, showering them with flower petals, them being recognized as warriors and fighters, and essentially a sense of gratitude around for the work that they were doing, went a long way towards sort of getting them back out there and ensuring that our streets and our hospitals remain clean.
So, Mr. Malik, I hope you will be finishing up quickly.
Yes, I'll just summarize. To summarize, I think I just wanted to say that the role of innovation in technology, but more importantly than that, sort of agility and the rate at which we respond to this, the role of taking pride in what we are doing. Somebody asked a question about what is the role of recycling in all of this. I wanted to respond to that. All our waste collection bags that are out there in hospitals collecting COVID waste across the 22 locations that we are currently doing this work, they are being made from our recycled plastic operations. So our recycling operations are actually feeding the ecosystem that is responding to the COVID challenge. And one learning that I wanted to share with all of you, that a lot of times there will be locations where there are no silver bullets, where there is no ideal option. And there, the best cannot become the enemy of good. And therefore, policymakers have to look at a hierarchy of options. If this is not available, what do you do? Similarly, for biomedical waste, if incineration is not available, if waste to energy is not available, if crematoriums are not available, then what kind of disinfection can be done? What kind of landfilling can be done? And having a consistent approach across the country to some of these challenges. I know I'm raising more questions than I'm probably answering, but I think that's probably the reality of today. I just wanted to share a last image of something that resonated with me when a number of previous speakers were talking about command and control centers. The image that you see is our own command and control center here in Hyderabad, which is the sort of the nodal place from which we are responding to this challenge in all the locations that we're currently operating. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and I look forward to the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Mr. Malik. An excellent presentation and giving a very good perspective of the practical problem that you face while carrying out the waste management services. I think that brings us to the next part of our webinar, and that is the Q&A session. So, can I request Santosh to...
thank you so much, Mr.
How many questions are there?
Yeah. So we have a lot of questions on the chat. I think some have been answered, some that we have qualified. We are also allowing 3 live questions, 3 attendees who could post their questions. So be very brief. Please raise your hands. Manali, you could queue them up, those 3 live audience who wants to ask the question. There is one question on EPR. As a new normal, can we make your waste your responsibility? EPR for manufacturing industry. This will considerably reduce the load on municipal waste collection and administration. We can also make the home waste to urban horticulture and improve the environment and circular economic tools. I think, Mr. Malik, you can take this question.
Yeah, so I think it's very interesting, but COVID and actually some other developments prior to COVID has made us realize that there is a convergence across the different waste streams. It is very difficult for you to say that this is domestic waste, so it's not hazardous. What about the batteries that go inside it? This is biomedical waste, but there are radioactive chemicals in it. This is industrial waste, but it has biomedical waste being generated in the health center of the industry. So there is a convergence around these so-called sources of industry, sources of waste. And I think the need of the hour is for us to be able to segregate them at source. And I'm sure all of you will agree, easier said than done. But there is no other alternative. If we are able to make at least the big waste classes get segregated at source, we can deal with them. And EPR is just one of the methods by which you can make this whole process more sustainable and having some kind of a sort of circularity in it. My bigger learning from COVID-related challenges is that the role of the informal sector in responding to such crisis at a time when the traditional workforce may not be available, that is one aspect to be kept in mind, and the role that industry can play in making that informal sector be a part of the mainstream. And the second learning is that the overall ecosystem approach, which is biomedical waste, which is of plastic nature, eventually will become a bag of recycled plastic, made out of recycled plastic, that will eventually collect more biomedical waste in the hospital.
Great.
Circularity is what we need to probably.
Yeah. We'll go on to the next question, and I think keep the live audience ready. So after this question, we'll take the next live question. Mr. Yadav, the next question is for you. State 2 best practices that others can learn what you've done in UP. Mr. Yadav, you'll have to unmute. We can't hear you.
Okay, now you can hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So in UP, if I have to say best practices which UP has followed, first on the institutional arrangement, where right from the apex level of the state governance system and tying up with the bottom line of the frontline workers, the institutional arrangement which UP has adopted probably could be a role model for any organization, state or institution. Say, I mean, we have almost our population size is almost 4 times maybe UK today. If you see as a country, we would be probably on the world at least 6th or 7th largest country maybe population wise. So what we did, in fact, how do we do it? So the first thing which we arranged was, like, as I said in my earlier statement, that right from the top at the chief minister level, there has been coordination committees formed in quite early during January and February to see the signals, and by March these committees started working. Particularly there were 11 groups of which were formed for different kind of works, right from stepping up our healthcare facilities. How do you create the isolation wards or corona wards, which we can say? How do you step up those PPE kits to be procured? All those things from the health sector side. From the side of the education, how do you provide, let's say, online education during the lockdown? So all those factors which are supposed to be done, there were committees which were formed at the apex level. 11 senior officers who were almost of the chief secretary level officers who were and it's a regular every day. We use the digital platform because this is the time when offices are locked. So the way I said that the first learning has been in the governance, has been using the digital platform. Every day we have in UP 17 municipal corporations. Of these 17 municipal corporations are about 60% of urban population of UP is in these 17 municipal corporations. We have a video conferencing with these 17 municipal commissioners every day. So the message, what we are supposed to do and what challenges they are facing on the ground, what policy decision has to be done, we are able to take that call on day-to-day basis. So that's the first thing I would say, where that has been, I would say, is a good practice which is there in a crisis. The second good thing which I would say has been related to 2 aspects. One, the way we have been able to track unorganized sector, I would say people who were supposed to be given benefits. Now, during a lockdown situation, it is not a regular situation where you distribute forms for beneficiaries. So how do you maintain social distancing norms? You don't crowd people there. There is no communication possible as such. And then at the same time, you are reaching to these vulnerable sections. How do you ensure that the transfers are taking properly? How you are able to identify people? So what we did, in fact, most of our cities and particularly the smart cities took the lead, and then this was replicated to other cities. So I would say, Mr. Samir, the way he was saying that, but the smart cities did play a role. It's just not the word smart, but because they were having integrated command control system, they had IT tools, and in these times, IT tools became important. So there were programs prepared, web-based applications were prepared, where it was given to all the workers or everyone to send their Aadhaar card or bank card so that it can be linked and verified both ways. So if a person need not come to fill a form as such, on a digital platform, he could send the information. Similarly, mapping up the vulnerable section of the society on a digital platform and tracking how our community kitchens are working and whether the actually the food packets are reaching. Again, technology has played a role, and I believe that could be another takeaway from, I mean, in fact, other states must be also doing these things, but I'm just saying that this has been also a good practice. Finally, I would say there has been innovations regarding telemedicine in certain smart cities. So how do you tie up the chain of suppliers to the people during the lockdown to provide essential items using the IT platforms, and how do you take care of people during the lockdown by using the telemedicine platform? I would say that innovation also could be taken as a best practice.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Mr. Yadav. Let's go to Yusuf. We'll take one live question. Yusuf, be very brief with your question, and if you're addressing it to the panelists, please take their name before you start the question.
I think Yusuf has to unmute.
Yusuf, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello. Yeah. Giving the opportunity. This is Yusuf from UNICEF Maharashtra office. I have just 3 submissions in 15 seconds. Since we were discussing about the smart cities, I think we have learned from the cyclones after the cyclone shelters. I think the smart cities and congested cities should have these permanent shelter camps for the migrants and laborers seeing this kind of a pandemic, because it has come once, it can come again. And the second observation is about that very nice point, Mr. Srinivas sir, about this housing kind of a sizes. In Dharavi, we are facing the same problem. So is it possible to evacuate above 50 people, above 50 years age of population to isolation and quarantine wards, because they are more vulnerable, and others to keep in the home because from their own immunity they can emerge as a kind of a COVID kind of a antibody can already be generated. And one other submission that hypochlorite solution doesn't kill COVID virus. It has been documented already in Lancet. It is largely for the targeted sanitization, but we are promoting hypochlorite solution everywhere for COVID disinfection, which may not be a correct option. Over.
Who is going to reply to these questions?
Yusuf, you'd like any one panelist to answer, or this question to everybody?
No, I believe all the colleagues are quite esteemed. They have excellent presentations. So it is more for my own learning I'm asking this, because Mumbai is going through a huge problem, and same in Pune.
Okay.
So
okay, thank you.
Well, I think, can I request Mr. Srinivas to address it, as he talked about, Mr. Yusuf Kabir talked about permanent shelter camps.
Also,
could it be part of the development process, development planning process?
Sorry to interrupt. I think we are running out of time. What we will do, we'll go to Mr. Samir Jain, and then Maraya, and then Srinivas, and Dr. Varsi. We can get your perspective on this and also the closing remarks. We can take all these questions offline later.
Correct. Santosh, you meant with respect to the points that Yusuf made?
Yes, and also your closing remarks. Very
sure.
brief.
So with respect to the housing and then the shelters, you know, again, while we should have the necessary arrangements to deal with these one-time pandemics, reforms have to be brought in terms of the types of intervention that we have planned under urban transformation or smart cities. We need to look at the available lands that the municipal corporation have and build temporary shelters for the time being. Will they be permanent? I don't think so. It's all about the rehabilitation of the people who are in need of these setups. And as I said, we look at the housing differently. We even look at the available, properties for rental. Could really give people these kind of shelters on a more permanent basis than the temporary ones. So that's my response to it. Again, I only would say that, lots of factors in an hour of need, everybody's thinking on the ground, everybody's committing to themselves. My eyes are on, do we learn from it? Can we the behavior change and then bring about the institutions that are necessary for a city to continuously evolve? Not plan for the worst all the time, because that comes at a cost. Readiness is what is needed, and this pandemic has shown us that. And I think collectively as India, we have done well than the others, but a lot more has to be done. And I believe Smart Cities is one of the platforms to do that. Thank you.
Maria, would you like to say? Compliment what?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. All I would like to say, I think it's been a really rich discussion. The questions were also really good, and I hope that some of these questions were already answered in the chat box. I hope the presentation can be shared. There's some really good resources already available from the government, including on waste management and sewage treatment and the protection of the sanitation workers. So there are some really good guidance available also for frontline workers, also for migrant camps, etc. So I would suggest please go and look for these government resources that are available. And then lastly, I'd like to suggest don't wait until we know all the answers, just go and act because anytime we can save to stop the spread of this virus is with us. So don't wait, don't sit at home, but go and do something good for the people of India. Thank you.
Thank you. Any quick question, Mr. Srinivas,
Thank you.
before we wind up?
I have gone through all the questions and I've tried to, answer those questions which were actually directed at me. And thank you very much for giving the opportunity. And I will save all the inputs which we have received from various participants. And definitely I'll be apprising ministry, whenever we are going to revisit our guidelines as well as, the building regulations. And thank you very much. And if somebody wants to contact me, I will share my email ID, and most welcome to contact me, and I'll be glad to give replies.
Thank you everyone. I think we have come to the end of the webinar, and I thank all the panelists for excellent presentations. And during the short time that was available, we have covered very major issues related to policy, implementation, knowledge, management, etc. Some of the points which really emerged, one was the use of digital platform, which has come as a positive, which many speakers have pointed out. And I think we should focus as a matter of policy how we could take it forward once COVID-19 is under control in our day-to-day and administration or management of things. The second part, which was very conspicuous, was the coordination and command and control center mechanism, which has been working very effectively in the smart cities. And to add to that, what Mr. Anurag Yadav mentioned, that the kind of institutional framework, institutional arrangement that is in place in Uttar Pradesh, I think is something to emulate, because that facilitates very quick appreciation of the facts and quick decision making. Paradigm shift in the development planning process, another issue which Mr. Srinivas has very elaborately covered, and I think that needs further discussion and engagement with the stakeholders. Greater focus on sanitization, social distancing in the informal settlements, slums, etc. is very important. Some more knowledge dissemination as regards the questions, the doubts about COVID-19, which all, chemicals help to control that, etc. I think needs to be done. And Mr. Malik, Mr. Varsi has focused on the waste management aspect, the responsibilities of different stakeholders, technology innovation, and I think the most important, which was pointed by the very first speaker, was the revenue. We have to take care of the revenue generation, because in the times to come, this is going to be a very, very major challenge, not only for urban local bodies, but also for the state and the central government. So I once again thank all the speakers, all the participants for actively participating in this webinar, and also thank the host for organizing it. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. One quick question to all the panelists. Can we share your email IDs and the presentations that you have done with the audience? Yeah.
I've already mentioned about my email ID.
Thank you, Srinivasan. Yes, Mr. Malik, you had a question.
No, I just said it's perfectly fine.
Okay, thanks. Okay, thank you. Mr. Yadav, okay, thank you. Thank you so much. On behalf of Messamunchen India and IFAT India, I thank you very much for joining us for this panel discussion. Please also join us for the next panel discussion. Maybe as an audience, you could be part of it on the 29th of April. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Many thanks from All India Institute of Local Self